It is Sunday, the 16th of October, 2016. I'm in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, engaged in my alternative spiritual practice of protesting against Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy. And amongst the injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy that I'm protesting against is the fact that the Unitarian Universalist religious community, as represented by the Unitarian Universalist Association in Boston, does in fact misuse Canada's blasphemy law in clergy abuse cover-up legal bullying that seeks to intimidate me into removing blog posts about such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers, to say nothing of certain Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers. And that is quite the perversion of justice. You know, it's a perversion of justice that seeks to hide sexual perversion in the Unitarian Church. So we're going to just walk back and forth with picket signs, one in each hand. The one in my right hand says, Unitarian Universalist misuse blasphemy law 2, ellipsis. Left hand, cover up and deny pedophilia and rape. So those two picket signs make a very clear statement about Unitarian Universalists misusing blasphemy law to hide the worst forms of clergy sexual abuse. But you know, it doesn't specifically reference clergy because they, in accusing me and falsely accusing me of blasphemous libel, although they did use the word ministers, one of the cases that I blogged about, indeed the only case that I blogged about in which I specifically referred to the Unitarian Universalist sex offender as a pedophile rapist, was actually not about a minister. It was about a lay leader of First Parish Norwell in Massachusetts. And that lay leader, Richard Buell, to the very best of my knowledge, is not a minister in the Unitarian Universalist Church. So there was some sloppiness, to say the least, in terms of the accuracy of what was written in the cease and desist demand letter that I was served with. Okay, so I got a call coming in, and we're just going to answer it. I think I know what this call is about. It's actually about the blasphemy law misuse I'm talking about. Hello. Good morning. It's a very good morning. I'm doing my church protest, but we can talk if you want. I'm in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal right now. Yeah. Today, I'm usually finished by around 11 or so. Okay, catch you later. Okay, right, you too. Yeah, bye-bye. So, speaking to a journalist who was interested in covering the story of the Unitarian Universalist Association's misuse of blasphemy law to cover up pedophilia and rape, but he decided that he would prefer to wait until I wasn't actually protesting to ask his questions. Guess he doesn't want any distractions and so on. So that's fine by me. I'll talk to him later. Good morning. Well, yes, that's because this church has been ignoring this protest for many years, so as long as they ignore it, I guess I'll be protesting. This passerby commented that I've been doing this, i.e. this protest, for many years, and she's absolutely right. This protest was initiated in May of 1998, and I will say that, in May of 1998, I was not standing accused of the criminal act of blasphemous libel by atheist Unitarians. That's a later development that I've added to the protest. It's an escalation of the situation thanks to the not only negligence of the Unitarian Universalist Association and the Unitarian Church of Montreal, but also the incredibly foolish attempts to silence me rather than dealing responsibly with the issues that I'm protesting against. But yes, it's basically been over 18 years since my protest began. And so we're less than 2 years away from celebrating the 20th anniversary of my protest against Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy. I will say that when I began protesting in May of 1998, it arose directly out of non-sexual clergy abuse committed by Reverend Ray Drennan, who was the minister of the Unitarian Church of Montreal at the time. Also related anti-religious intolerance and bigotry on the part of other Montreal Unitarians, such as Frank Green, who was the president of the Unitarian Church of Montreal at the time. But even at that early date, in May of 1998, I had become aware of how the Unitarian Universalist Association essentially dismisses even quite serious cases of clergy sexual misconduct, because when the Unitarian Universalist Association and the Unitarian Church of Montreal essentially dismissed my clergy misconduct complaint against Reverend Ray Drennan and pretended he'd done nothing wrong, I contacted other Unitarian Universalists who are, basically experts in clergy abuse, clergy misconduct. These were people who, had been advocates for victims of clergy sexual misconduct and so on. And I was told, very early on that according to these experts, such as Reverend Deborah Pope Lance and other members of what was called UUs for Right Relations at the time, that, if I thought I had it bad, that there were actually very, very serious cases of clergy sexual misconduct committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers where the ministers faced no accountability whatsoever, and so on. So when I became aware that the UUA just across the board was doing a terrible job of dealing with all forms of clergy misconduct, I added protest against its mishandling of clergy sexual misconduct complaints to my protest. My unsafe sect picket sign, is essentially a veiled reference to unsafe sexual misconduct committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers. It's a play on the word safe sex, obviously. And that picket sign dates back to at least May of 2000. So that picket sign's over 16 years old. But in fact, it wasn't brand new when I brought it down to Boston and displayed it in front of the 25 Beacon Street, the headquarters of the Unitarian Universalist Association. In fact, that unsafe sect picket sign, if I remember correctly, was also accompanied by a picket sign that said cult is a 4-letter word, because one of the things I was protesting was the false and malicious labeling of an interreligious event that I'd organized as Your Cult by Reverend Ray Drennan, and also slandered as a cult by Frank Green, president of the Unitarian Church of Montreal. So this actually goes back to 1999, mid to early 1999. So it really was not very long after I began my protest that I added the issue of sexual misconduct to my protest in support of those people who had been victims of sexual misconduct committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers and had been very, very poorly served by the Unitarian Universalist Association in Boston. So certainly within a year, at most a year and a half after I began my protest, I had added the sexual misconduct issue to my protest about non-sexual clergy misconduct. Although I generally spoke in general terms, I use the words, words like abusive clergy, clergy abuse, so very broad. It includes clergy sexual misconduct, but it also includes non-sexual misconduct. So I didn't specifically zero in on the clergy sexual misconduct, because one of the things I wanted to do was to make it clear that, not only does the Unitarian Universalist religious community mishandle complaints of clergy sexual misconduct and essentially protect ministers accused of sexual misconduct, but they also, dismiss and ignore and essentially write off complaints about non-sexual clergy misconduct. Yes, I've been addressing clergy sexual misconduct since, I'd say, well, quite frankly, I think even when my protest first began, I was aware of the issue. But in terms of this being reflected on my picket signs, absolutely certainly within a year and a half of the beginning of my protest, so absolutely certainly by mid-1999, because I remember very clearly having picket signs that spoke about abusive clergy, and as I said, in the broadest sense, the unsafe sect picket sign clearly alluded to sexual misconduct committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers without actually coming out and specifically using the word sex. See, that's it. That's where the whole double meaning pun comes in. Unsafe sect was and is a play on safe sex. Here's a sign right here. Now, actually, the sign, as it is now, no longer has a question mark. The original sign said unsafe sect, and it had a question mark after sect. It was basically asking a question. Is Unitarian Universalism an unsafe sect? It was something of a rhetorical question, because from my point of view and the point of view of people who were victims of clergy misconduct and so on and other injustices and abuses, it most certainly is an unsafe sect. But I softened the blow a little bit by posing it as a question. But it is no longer a question, it is a statement. And it is a statement because the Unitarian Universalist religious community has repeatedly proven beyond any reasonable doubt that it is not only unsafe towards me personally, but numerous other people, and not just victims of clergy misconduct. The Unitarian Universalist religious community is unsafe in other ways, but certainly it has an absolutely lamentable track record of doing very little to hold Unitarian Universalist ministers accountable for clergy sexual misconduct, and going to considerable lengths to cover up and hide their sexual misconduct and to protect them from any serious consequences for their misconduct. In fact, I have reasonable grounds to believe that the Unitarian Universalist Association has protected certain Unitarian Universalist ministers from criminal charges arising out of their sexual misconduct. Certain states prohibit sexual misconduct by clergy. In other words, the state law makes it a crime for a minister to have sexual relations with a congregant, and the religious communities are expected to report this to the state authorities when these things occur. I have reasonable grounds to believe that the Unitarian Universalist Association and individual Unitarian Universalist churches in certain states, such as Texas, for instance, as one, in fact, even though they were aware of sexual misconduct, indeed quite egregious sexual misconduct on the part of a Unitarian Universalist minister, or two or three or four, essentially did not report the sexual misconduct to the state authorities so that the minister could be prosecuted under the state laws. They basically kept it quiet, and I have reasonable grounds to believe ensured that the minister got out of the state. So yes, I'm afraid I got a nice little beep there. And oh, and a thumbs up, big thumbs up. That's nice. So yeah, I do get a certain amount of positive honks from the public. Just had two within the last 10-15 minutes or so. Yeah, as far as it goes, the public is generally quite supportive of my protest. Okay, so we're coming up to 17 minutes. So again, we're going to shut this down before the automatic cutoff.